Hi, I'm Nina Rowan Heller, and welcome to Energy Advantage Session 6. We are going to talk about optimism today, and there's a couple reasons I wanted to talk about this topic now during this time. The first being is that optimism actually impacts your health. Your overall health is impacted by what you think in your mind and the self-talk that you have going on, and even what you say to other people. So being optimistic, we know, changes our immunity system, it supports our cardiovascular system, it assists us in healing. We actually don't get as sick in general if we are more optimistic. So I talk about that a lot. I also wanted to mention about being optimistic actually impacts your finances. And I thought this is important to have this conversation now, because during this time where lots of people are hearing scary economic things, the really negative, pessimistic economic programming that's going out there, I want you to think about what your programming can be, and to understand that being optimistic actually supports your success in your finances. There's a website that I came across that I thought was phenomenal, and it's phenomenal for several reasons. First I'm going to identify what business it was that came up with this website, and it's Frostbank. Frostbank actually created a website called Opt for Optimism, OPT for optimism.com. And on that website, you can find all the research that supports mental health, physical health, and your economic health. And it has the research backing that. So you can go all in to learn all the different reasons why when we actually think positive thoughts, it changes our cellular response. And they'll give you all the research. But what we do know is when we are thinking negative thoughts, our cells stay closed. When we think positive thoughts, and Baylor University has microscopes that can actually see this, our cells open up and receive nutrients and release toxins, and that's what keeps us healthy. So when we're thinking positive thoughts, and actually Baylor knows that when we're in prayer, it also does that. That opens our cells up, receives nutrients, and releases toxins. So Opt for Optimism is a website that you can go and look and read and research and understand why changing our thoughts actually will help you mentally, physically, and financially. I also wanted to bring up a reason why this is super important right now. When we are thinking negatively, and I'm going to give you some examples of what might be if you're struggling with thinking negative. Typically, people who think negative have a couple of different areas that you can see how they think negative. The first one is catastrophizing. And that's where people hear some information and then they think of all the terrible things that could happen from that point forward. And oftentimes that's a program that you may have been taught by a parent, and because you might have had a parent that was in the Depression or in the war, has been through struggling times where it really was a catastrophe, where things changed that much. They grow through their life wanting to make sure that they're prepared for a catastrophe. And so that if you have that kind of thinking, or you might have been programmed that way, or you have a family member that might have been speaking to you that way, it's good to understand, am I doing that? So do I catastrophize? Did someone just tell me one piece of information and I thought of 30 that happened from this? So that's one. Personalizing. This is a big one for social media, and it blows my mind that something can happen to somebody and everybody makes it about them. And I just think it's easier in these times where we have this access to so much information, and we might be connected to a person just through social media, not even knowing them. But what I see is, let's say, for example, a plane crash happened. And a plane crash happened, and what you hear and read on social media is you'll see people who made it personal. I was at the airport today. I could have been on that plane. I flew on that kind of plane 2 years ago. And you start hearing everybody bringing in their own personal stories about that. Well, you don't realize that they're personalizing it unless you thought of something like just a car crash, because people or an accident, not that people have cars and they didn't say, oh my gosh, so-and-so was in an accident today. Everybody's response isn't, I drive a car, I was in a car today, I drove on a busy street. We don't say any of that. We've sort of realized that's something that we can allow that to be separate. You still will hear it, but when you hear people complain, you make everything about you, that might be an indication that you might be personalizing, which may lend to you being more negative. Polarizing. People think black or white, good or bad. Things are really amazing and working, or things are not working at all. And you want to understand, if I think that way, that I might be negative. And then the last is to really think about your filter. If you're a person that filters information and you filter to really just find the negative, no matter if you're watching the news and you and I watch the same news story and you walk away with, we're in trouble for the next 5 years, and I walk away with, wow, it's good to know so that we can change the next 5 years. We have two different filters. And so you want to understand you're filtering, you're catastrophizing, personalizing, and polarizing. Those are the things that you want to look and kind of do some insight and say, do I do those things? Because if you do, then you have the opportunity to shift into what would be a much more positive mindset. And even if you just inch along the scale from optimism to pessimism, that there's some realists in there. And I think realists are closer towards the center, but leaning more towards pessimism. I think realism can be shared with an optimist. So for an optimist, if I believe that something has happened, my car just broke down and I have a flat tire. And so my optimistic self is, okay, how am I going to fix this tire? Who am I going to call? Do I need to get there faster than anybody can come and repair or fix the tire, change it to AAA? Maybe they won't be here in time. Can I do it on my own? Do I have a car that has a spare? All of these things go through my mind. If you're a pessimist, the first thing that goes through your mind may be, oh my God, I have a flat tire. This sucks. I can't get to my meeting. And you don't hear solutions. You hear all of the negative and, for lack of a better word, victimization. And so what I want you to understand is that optimism creates options. It is the key to solutions. So when we are being optimistic, it's like a giant brainstorm that happens in our mind of, what can I do? What do I need to do? What would be a good solution? What might work here? So you really want to just think, if I can work towards optimism, I can work towards options. I get to have more options. So no matter what is going on out there in the world, if I'm optimistic, then I say, okay, does this impact me? Is there something I need to do right now? Because that's my optimism going through and saying, what are my options? Is this something I need to do now? Is this really impacting me? Or do I need to think about something else that actually does impact me? So optimism will cue you for more and more and more options, which lead to solutions. So being solution focused might be a good way to transition from a pessimistic view to an optimistic view. If you think, I'm going to be solution focused. So solution focused would say, I'm looking for options. And then by looking for options, as soon as the flat tire happens, you start thinking more optimistically. So I gave you two ways that you can approach it. You can either go all in and saying, I'm going to be optimistic and I'm going to start thinking optimistically and letting go of some of the negative thinking, and I want to reframe, or I can think options, which will lead me to being more optimistic. Now, the last thing I want to address is the reframing. Every situation that occurs has one side and then another. Okay, so for example, you can think of it as good or bad, but that would be that person who is polarizing. I would say there's just one side or another. I got laid off from a job when I was an undergrad. And I tell this story all the time because I worked with this amazing psychiatrist at this mental health hospital, which I like to say back at the mental health hospital, which makes it sound like I was there. But this psychiatrist told me how to really do this well. That really helped me understand. So I got laid off, and my first thought was option, okay? Which is not really what you would think when you're a college student, undergrad. Every dime counts, every paycheck you get is significant. But I thought, I got the call, they said they're laying everybody off that worked 11 to 7. So I worked midnight shift, and they're laying everybody off and they're replacing them with temps because they're gonna do these budget cuts. And goodbye, see ya. And I went, okay, I hung up the phone and said, options, what are my options? Well, it's almost Christmas. So I never would have gotten the holiday off because the hospital's open 7 days a week. 24 hours a day. So I actually wasn't going to get a big chunk of time. So I said, oh, options. I'm going to take Christmas holiday. That'll be nice. And other options. I'm going to job search when I come back because the only jobs that are going to exist right now are probably going to be for holiday help, and I'm going to take the time off. So I didn't think about job searching, and I just said, I'm going to job search in January and I'm going to go have a holiday. And then when people said, you got laid off, I said, yes, I'm going to take my Christmas vacation and I'm going to go visit family. And I didn't get all into it. I had options. While I was on vacation, I got a call from the hospital, and the hospital said, hey, we realized you do all the quality assurance reviews for the charts. We didn't know that, and we need you because we don't get paid if those don't get done. And we didn't realize that's what you did at night. And so I said, yeah. And they said, so we'd like you to come back. And I said, I'd like a raise. And they said, okay. Because nobody paid me extra to do that on top of what I did. I just did that because I was the likely person to do it and detail oriented, and I worked at a quiet shift for the most part. And so I got a raise, and they said, we'd like you to come back now. I said, I'd like to come back after New Year's. And they said, okay, fine. So I ended up with a raise and got to have a Christmas vacation from being laid off. And I realized that if you're a pessimist, you may say, well, that situation was going to unfold that way anyway. I would argue no, because if I was a pessimist, I probably would have not been open to even having that call from them. I might have been angry about it and said, yeah, it serves you right. Or I might have been so frustrated, I might have already gotten another job. So I just want to think you can look at any situation and say being laid off sounds like a horrible thing or not. Maybe it's an opportunity. So when something happens where it could be perceived, if I was polarized or in my thinking and thinking good or bad, or if I was filtering everything saying, oh, this is the really terrible part of this. But instead I always think, what's the opportunity? Even if I'm running late, I think, oh, what's the opportunity here? And I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm going to be able to find a parking space without a lot of people. I'll know exactly where to go because everybody's already there. Whatever it is, you can change that by reframing. And so just during these times, if you can think, if I am optimistic, I will have the opportunity to have more solutions. When I am given information, if I can step back and think, how can I reframe that? What are my possibilities? What is a solution? What is something that I could do instead of thinking this is the end of something I really wanted? So the last thing I want to tell you is part of that is about being detached. And that's a hard word, but if you think that there is this very specific path that you're on and that's where you belong, whenever anything interrupts that path, it's real easy to think of it as negative. If you can think that you're on a path and maybe life's path looks like you're going along and then something changes. Oh, I got laid off from that job. That's okay. I'm going on now this path. the more detached you are to, I need to work here forever, this is my career, this is what I think my future is, the more you can just say, going with the flow, okay, here, this is a new situation, new circumstance, a plane delay, a flat tire, a layoff from a job, a change from any of your economic situation. All of those can be reframed to being something that makes you look at options and make a change. And it can end up being an absolutely wonderful thing. So the last thing I'm going to mention is, I never hear people who accomplish amazing things get up on stage and say, everything worked exactly as planned. They get up on stage and they tell you, I had challenge after challenge, and what changed and allowed them to actually continue is that they did have an optimistic approach and said, well, that's not working, I need to do this, or this isn't the way we're going, now we do this. And so people who achieve and actually have a lot of success oftentimes have mastered how to be a realist that lives in an optimal world, and they are able to see whatever comes at them. They're detached about the outcome so that they can shift and come up with more options. So I'm Nina Rowan Heller. Thanks for listening. Take care.